Thanks actually for having me here, and it's a pleasure for me to be and to talk now to you and your subscribers. Jonathan, actually, journalism, I would maybe broaden this question because journalism is very important not only to preserve Ukrainian identity and Ukrainian statehood, but in the situation we are in now, it's very important to preserve democracy. And it's a challenge not only for Ukraine, but for the whole world. I believe that we not always recognize how important it is access to free and unbiased information. And but our experience proves it. Uh, People who stayed under occupation in Ukraine, they revealed that for them having this access to media was as important than as access to food, to water, drinking water, because when you find yourself in a situation when you don't know what's happening, you cannot take decisions. And true journalism is about helping people to take right decisions. That's why we felt like nobody else how important journalism, independent journalism is.
And let's go back a little bit for historical context, because of course, after 2014, after Maidan and the sort of some of the chaos that followed that, there was, of course, a real focus on Kiev and perhaps less focus on what was happening in Donbass and the east. And it made it much easier for Russia to create an alternative informational space, a gray zone of sort of confusion and half-truths and lies, which, of course, enabled the environment for their invasion, for their sort of hybrid invasion to actually succeed. What, in your view, are the media lessons to prevent this kind of gray zone informational capture that Russia seems to be so expert at?
Yeah, that's a very important remark because media are those who take responsibility to inform people uh, despite of them being exhausted or bored with information. And that's actually what happened in Ukraine. At some point, people's brains got exhausted from the information related to the war in eastern part of Ukraine, and people started avoiding this information. And journalism nowadays, as most media outlets have built their models based on revenue and advertisement, they paid much attention to what readers want and what they don't want. But it's not always a good case in a situation where something vital is happening and people avoid looking at it, hearing and talking about it. And I think that media should, the most important lesson in this situation is that media have to do their job despite everything. Like they should do what they are supposed to do and not what people prefer, because in not it's not maybe something unique what happened in Ukraine. We see actually this happening now in many countries, that Ukraine is disappearing from the front pages, from the headlines, just because people want to read and to listen to something more optimistic, and there is nothing optimistic in the situation as it is.
And Well, we can touch upon that later because, of course, the Middle East takes up a lot of oxygen, um, but also Russia and Russians are very capable of sucking the oxygen out of the media atmosphere. And we see this in articles such as Newsweek that happened earlier this week, where you have not stories about Ukraine, but you have a story about Navalny. And this is not a news story. You know, he passed on almost a year ago. Um, and yet there is this process of turning him into a hero, a saint, some kind of icon. And there's a certain amount of mythologizing going on in Western media, as well as this endless distraction when new things come up, let's say in the Middle East. How is it possible to counter this while maintaining journalistic standards of objectivity?
Yeah, there's no simple answer to this question. I would say that, sticking to the standards and keeping the most important thing in the loop is the main role of journalism right now. And the case of Navalny you mentioned, actually, that is something what we in Ukraine um, look at, and we kind of feel that it is something that we cannot pay too much attention to right now because we are fighting against Russian invasion. But it's a phenomenon that we should pay attention to after we probably hopefully win this war. Because the story of Navalny is not a secret. He was a Russian far right activist, and his views on the Russia's foreign policy and his attitude towards representatives of other ethnical groups was um, actually very rude. And now, as he became Putin's prisoner, he like this case um, now like equals to being a Ukraine supporter or a Democrat, but it is not. This means that the general picture of the world is very complex, and sometimes we just avoid thinking about complexity because we got used to very short forms, short form content, short articles, reels, not films, and that's how humans' brain got used to this, black and white thinking and this very quick consumption of information. But when you go deeply into the case, you will see so many layers in it. And that's also what media should contribute to. They should make people's worldview more complex than it is now.
And let's again turn back a little bit because after 2014, Ukraine had to entirely reconstruct its media industry and indeed the very practice of journalism from journalist schools and universities all the way up. That to an extent meant getting rid of an old generation who were trained under more Soviet techniques. How would you characterize, the evolution of Ukraine's media and of course the pressures it's come under from oligarchic media ownership after 2014, and now of course you've got centralization, state control to an extent in the media, plus independent outlets, but you're in a wartime media environment, so there is of course going to be some pressure from central government for certain narratives to be covered and some perhaps not. How has it evolved to handle these pressures, plus the continuous backdrop of Russian disinformation?
Yeah, I would maybe start from the very end, responding to your question about centralization of the informational policy in Ukraine. You probably think about United Marathon that is run by the Ministry of Culture, and it's actually controlled by the president's office. The official version why this marathon still exists 2.5 years after the full-scale invasion started is that people are still looking for an official source of information, and they trust the marathon in terms that it provides timely and unbiased data and facts about what's happening. But in fact, uh, the marathon was truly important for Ukraine's audiences in the very first weeks of the full-scale invasion. Then actually many media took responsibility, and they started to report on on the events, um, not only on TV, but also actually Ukrainian journalism is mostly online. Um, we are a very digitalized country, and most people use mobile phones to consume information. But still, marathon is rather remains a tool to keep influence on elderly audiences in Ukraine who are very active voters. Um, and this is something that influences a part of Ukrainian society, but it truly doesn't influence the whole society. Most people in Ukraine don't consume TV content. That's why they are not the audience of the marathon. But we, even in a wartime, we do have a very strong and influential media system. It means that we have a broad network of independent online media, radio stations, and even print media now, which means that um, the audiences of all ages still, even in wartime, do have access to quality information. And it's, as I mentioned in the very beginning, it's very important. But going back to the first part of your question, the situation we have now in the media sector, when the wartime didn't impact the independent media, and we truly don't have the the military censorship as it's supposed to be in many cases, as we know it, is that we do have a very strong civil society, and media are a part of the civil society, and this is an output of of an active work of the civil society for the last decade. So after the revolution of dignity, the civil society institutions strengthened a lot. And I have to admit also an important role of donor community and international institutions. But the most effort Ukrainian society put into it. So it's anti-corruption, is journalism for sure, is human rights sector. This is like and we have so many bright activists that push development forward. I mean, the society's development, they push it forward even in the background of war. And as you mentioned, we had a shift to modern journalism education, and I also used to be a part of it, because since 2014 I worked at the School of Journalism here in Lviv for 5 years. We ran a master's program for journalists, and it was the very first master's program in Ukraine, where students with a bachelor's degree in other sciences than journalism could enroll. And at that time it was an innovation, because the system we inherited from the Soviet time, from the Soviet Union, was that people with bachelor's degree in journalism only went to master's studies, and that approach gave huge impetus to development of journalism. Now I see that so many war reporters, so many writers who graduated from this master's program, they are very bright Ukrainian journalists right now. So they are working in different media, and they are working also for foreign media as well. So that's what gave us a really good result. This was an effort worth the resource.
That's absolutely fascinating. And of course, it highlights, I think, what's going to be a huge challenge when Donbass is regained as part of Ukraine's sovereign territory. It will have been under occupation, parts of it, for more than 10 years. And even those parts that were taken after the full-scale invasion, what has gone on there? The attempts at brainwashing, the terror, this kind of stuff. It's going to be very difficult, isn't it, to reintroduce a free and pluralistic media to overcome, I would say, the sort of informational terror that has been imposed on those territories for so long. This is perhaps going to be a unique experiment, and the outcome is unknown. And given also the population is going to skew towards people who are an older generation, who are perhaps more of a Soviet mindset. This is going to be an immense challenge to reintroduce media, pluralism, and even democracy into the occupied territories in the East.
Yeah, and it's also a huge discussion in the Ukrainian society now, but also in the journalism community. We are preparing ourselves to launching media in deoccupied territories. And actually, it was slightly different case when a part of Kherson region and Kharkiv region was deoccupied at the end of 2022. Independent media came back very quickly on those territories. But in the case you mentioned, and the same would be in Crimea, it would be a great challenge. And I also have to admit that it would strongly depend. I mean, this media policy would strongly depend on the political status of those territories. and we have no idea what should it look like and what would it look like. And actually, why, like, coming back again and again to what is the role of journalism. I remember my like the dean of the School of Journalism when I joined it. We had a graduation for journalists, and it was my first experience. And I remember his speech. He said, the mission of journalism is to help one person at some specific point of his or her life to take one important decision. And you know, when when we talk about journalism and media on the deoccupied territories, this would be also a case for people living there. Journalism should help them take right decisions, and you know, to broaden their picture of the world, and help them to understand what they missed. It's actually not about journalism only. In the past 10 years, Ukraine has made a huge step forward its development. Like, for example, we had a medical reform. We had a digital reform. We don't like use paper documents mostly anymore. And I like and journalism would be a part of the solution, how to guide people, you know, through very pragmatic and daily things, how they should adapt to the new reality. And yeah, we are preparing ourselves to it. We have also a very strong community of media support organizations, and they will also play a huge role um, in organizing this independent journalism comeback on these territories.
And I've got two sort of questions left, and I think this is the introduction to what hopefully is a sort of much longer conversation. But one of the problems, as it seems to me, with Western media, especially television, mainstream media, is it lacks the historical context and understanding of not only Ukraine's history, but also Russia's history and Russia's behavior in Ukraine over many centuries. It lacks this historical detail. And of course, you know, as some of us who've got really engaged with the subject of Ukraine have started to learn a lot more about that history over the last 3 years and longer, we've been on a sort of journey. But the mainstream media sort of seems to still lack that detail, lack that depth of context. It's also become apparent that a lot of Ukrainians are also on a similar journey to rediscover history and identities that Russia has purposefully eradicated and erased during the Soviet period and even before. How important is it for the media, especially the Ukrainian media, to provide that historical context, that depth of understanding to make the media more resilient?
Yeah, actually, it was a boom of historical YouTube channels in the very beginning of the full-scale invasion. Those channels that was launched before the invasion, they gained, hundreds percent of popularity, and new channels and new media outlets were launched. So people were attached to this topic, you know, regaining their authentical identity, and getting know more about what was what their past looked like. And in Ukraine, we also have a very popular TV shows related to historical background. You know, this regaining the cultural heritage, historical heritage, and like they gather millions of viewers. As for Western media, I don't know. I don't know if there's something unique, and if it's something isolated from what we have already discussed. That people are hunting like very short forms of content. You know, they are looking for something easy to digest. That's why I think I assume media don't pay attention to historical background. But there is something that we almost witnessed, you know, for example, World War II. You know, in every family there is a part of history related to World War II, because it was relatively, you know, it was something that our parents or grandparents witnessed. And I would really like, I would find it very relevant that at least media will go back to the history of the families, that we as readers, because I'm also a part of the audience, not only a part of the media sector, that media just pay attention to something what is what is important to every person, is how our parents and grandparents survived in the World War II, and what were actually the general conditions, and what were the decisions that a regular family had to take, finding itself in the war. And I think that it would make our experience closer to to each and every person. I think that it's what we are missing, because without this, you know, background, we just forget that peace and democracy is nothing what could be inherited. It's something that we should fight for, and without without this struggle for regaining democracy, I don't think we will survive as a humankind, because we are threatened by more powerful, like by more powerful actors. We are threatened by autocracies that take very quick and very efficient decisions, much quicker and much more efficient than democracies do. And if journalism wouldn't lead to this, I don't think we will survive as a humankind in the long run, because you know, we are living in a world where nuclear power could be used very easily, and we don't have a proper response to it at this moment.
And the last question, I think, leads on from that. And of course, with Ukraine fighting for not just the survival, it means that there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who were not necessarily in the military before, but now have that kind of experience. How important is it after victory that veterans are not just represented in politics and political processes, but also are key within the reconstruction process and decisions made? And indeed, even the veterans' voices are heard within the media and become part of the media apparatus itself. You know, they move and transition from being veterans to becoming sort of journalists and storytellers themselves.
This transition was firstly made from civil world to the military, because I know dozens of journalists who are serving in the army now. So after the war, they will come back to their media outlets, and hopefully they will continue doing what they were doing before taking to the army. And it's a different situation than, for example, with veterans in the countries where only military people served and went to the warfare. In Ukraine, millions of civilians turned to be almost overnight. And these are businessmen, journalists, teachers, drivers, plumbers. These are people of all professions. And I truly think that those who will come back after the war ends, they will strengthen the visibility of veterans and the impact of veterans on the social, like the decision making on the scale of the society. I think that journalists now are doing a great job in highlighting the role of veterans, those who already came back, and slowly but consistently we are forming a culture of inclusion of veterans in decision making and in a broader network of the civil society as well. So media are reflecting what's happening now in the society. For sure, a long way is ahead, but still it's an ongoing process, I would say. There's nothing that we should expect in the future, but it's a work that we are doing now already. And it's tough, it's demanding, but still it's a part of the society. I mean, this war experience of millions of people, and it's our responsibility as a media sector to highlight it and to help people who served in the army, who sacrificed their lives. I mean, for at least for specific time period, to reintegrate in the society and to strengthen their visibility.
Well, yeah, I think we've run out of time on this. I very much look forward to future conversations, but thank you so much for sharing your insights. Of course, we're going to put links to your profile and the Lviv Media Forum if people are interested in following up and learning more. But for today, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights with the audience.
Thank you, Jonathan. It was both a pleasure and an honor for me to be with you and to talk to you. So I hope that it is not our last conversation, and you are always welcome in Ukraine.